Well, this is probably the most classic Far Side that most people my age do remember from Gary Larson's comics. The cow standing in the field, one's a lookout car, they all go back to grazing, and then the car passes, they all stand up like they're human again. What we don't know about cows might surprise us. Gary had a thing for them, I suppose. So our goal today on lesson 6.4 is to discuss the need for adequate monitoring of environmental parameters when making policies decisions. All right, let's look at our objectives then. Explain the concept of ecological footprint, identify the role of ecology in a sustainable future. All right, let's think about it. Every year the EPA awards 10 President's Environmental Youth Awards. Past winners, as you can see right here, all came up with ideas that protect the environment while satisfying both present and future needs. Hey, they're all girls too. Gotta get some boys in there. These kinds of ideas and leadership are what will help us chart a new course for the future. Objective 1 is to explain the concept of ecological footprint. All right, ecologists refer to the human impact on the biosphere using a concept called the ecological footprint. An ecological footprint describes the total area of functioning land and water ecosystems needed to both to provide the resources an individual population uses and to absorb the waste that individual or populations generates. Ecological footprints take into account the need to provide resources such as energy, food, water, and shelter, and to absorb such waste as sewage and greenhouse gases. Ecologists use the footprint calculations to estimate the biosphere's carrying capacity for humans. Calculating actual numbers for ecological footprints is complicated. The concept is so new that there is no universally accepted way to calculate footprint size. In addition, footprints only give like a snapshot, an instant of the situation at a particular point in time. Although calculating absolute footprints is difficult, ecological footprints can be used for making comparisons among different populations. The per-person use of resources in America is almost twice that in England, more than twice that in Japan, and almost 6 times that in China, as you can see from the graph here. And here is a map that shows each country's in proportion to its ecological footprints. Yes, we are fat and red. Not good. All right, objective 1. Explain the concept of ecological footprint. Here it is. Ecological footprint describes the total area of functioning land and water ecosystems needed to both provide the resources an individual or population uses and to absorb and make harmless the waste that individuals or populations generates. According to one data set, the average American has an ecological footprint over 4 times larger than the global average. Fat and happy people, Americans. All right, objective 2. Identify the role of ecology in a sustainable future. The future of the biosphere just depends on our ecological footprints, global population growth, and technological development. Ecological research properly collected, analyzed, and applied can help us make decisions that will produce profoundly positive effects on the human condition. Between 20 and 50 kilometers above the Earth's surface, the atmosphere contains a relatively high concentration of ozone called the ozone layer. Ozone at ground level, as we learned before, is a pollutant, but the natural ozone layer absorbs harmful ultraviolet UV radiation from sunlight, and by absorbing the UV light, the ozone layer serves as a global sunscreen. Beginning in the 1970s, satellite data revealed the ozone concentration over Antarctica was dropping during the southern winter. An area of lower ozone concentration is commonly called the ozone hole. And for several years after the ozone hole was first discovered, it kept growing larger and larger and lasted longer each year. These images show the progression from 1981 to 1999. The darker blue color in the later image indicates that the ozone layer has thinned since 1981. In 1974, a research team demonstrated that gases called chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, could damage the ozone layer. CFCs were once widely used as propellants in aerosol cans, in refrigerators, and as coolant in refrigerators and freezers, and air conditioners, and in the productions of plastic foams too. Once research on the CFCs was published and accepted by the scientific community, oh, strange, they shot right up in the atmosphere and eating up the ozone layer. The rest was up to the policymakers. Following recommendations of ozone researchers, 191 countries signed a major agreement, the Montreal Protocol, which banned most uses of CFCs. Ozone-destroying halogens from CFCs have been steadily decreasing since about 1994. Evidence that the CFC ban has had a positive effect there is evidence that it has had positive long-term effects. Current data predict that although the ozone hole will continue to fluctuate in size from year to year, it should disappear for good around the middle of this century. So there you go, gone down drastically. So let's look at another case study. From 1957 to 1997, as we've talked about before, the annual world seafood catch has grown from 19 million tons to more than 90 million tons, which is a recent dramatic declines in the commercial fish populations have proved that the fish supply is not endless or a renewable resource. Nemo. From the 1950s to the 1970s, larger boats and high-tech fish finding equipment made the fishing effort both more intense and more efficient. Catches rose for a time, but then began falling and continue to fall despite the most intense fishing effort in history. The total mass of cod caught has decreased significantly since the 1980s because of the sharp decrease of cod biomass in the ocean. Fishery ecologists gathered data including age, structure, and growth rates. Analysis of this data showed that fish populations were shrinking. Ecologists determined that recent declines in fish catches were the result of overfishing. Fish were being caught faster than they could be replaced by reproduction. There's the biomass catch, and here's the actual catch. The U.S. National Marine Fisheries Service created guidelines for commercial fishing. The guidelines specified how many fish of what size could be caught in U.S. waters. In 1996, the Sustainable Fisheries Act closed certain areas to fishing until stocks were able to recover. Stocks of fish, so to speak. Other areas are closed seasonally to allow fish to breed and spawn too. Aquaculture, what is that? It's the farming of aquatic animals, and it offers a good alternative to commercial fishing with limited environmental damage if it is managed very properly. Overall progress in restoring fish population has been slow. Huge fleets from other countries do continue to fish the ocean waters outside U.S. territorial waters. Some are reluctant to accept conservation efforts because regulations that protect fish population for the future cause job and income losses today. The challenge is to come up with the sustainable practices that ensure the long-term health of fisheries with minimal short-term impact on the fishing industry. The most reliable current information available on global climate change comes from the 2007 report on the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Now, this is a very touchy topic that maybe you should discuss with your parents, but I'm going to tell you what scientists say. The IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, reports contain data analysis that have been agreed upon and accepted by 2,500 climate scientists from around the world and the governments participating in the study. The IPCC report confirms early observations that global temperatures are rising. This increase in average temperature is, as we know, called global warming. Winds and ocean currents, which are driven by differences in temperatures across the biosphere, which we learned about in Chapter 4, I think, shape climate. The IPCC report discusses climate change, changes in patterns of temperature, rainfall, and other physical and environmental factors that can result from global warming. There is much physical and biological evidence that has contributed to our current understanding of the climate change issue. 11 of the 12 years between 1995 and 2006 were among the warmest years since temperature recording began in 1850. Between 1906 and 2005, Earth's average temperature rose 0.74 degrees Celsius. The largest changes are occurring near the Arctic Circle. Sea level, the mean sea, global sea ice here, has risen since 1961 at a rate of 1.8 millimeters each year. This increase is caused by warmer water expanding and by melting glaciers, ice caps, and polar ice sheets. Satellite data confirm that Arctic ice, sea ice, glaciers, and snow cover are decreasing. Each organism's range is determined by factors like temperature, humidity, and rainfall, like we've learned before. If those conditions change, the organisms can be affected. For example, if temperature rises, organisms would usually move toward cooler places away from the equator and from warm lowlands to cooler, higher altitudes. In addition, plant flowering and animal breeding are often cued by seasonal changes. If warming is occurring, these organisms could respond as though spring begins earlier, which is actually happening too. Data from 75 studies, including 1,700 species of plants and animals, confirms that many species and communities are responding as though they are experiencing rising temperatures. For example, the yellow-bellied marmots are coming out of hibernation more than a month earlier than they used to. Researchers had to determine whether current warming is part of the natural cycle or whether it is caused by human activity or astronomical and geological changes. The IPCC report documents that concentration of carbon dioxide and several of the greenhouse gases have increased significantly over the last 200 years. Several kinds of data suggest this increase is due to the burning of fossil fuels combined with the cutting and burning of forests worldwide. These activities add carbon dioxide to the atmosphere faster than the carbon cycle removes it. Most climate scientists worldwide agree that this added carbon dioxide is strengthening the natural greenhouse effect, causing the biosphere to retain more heat. Now you understand what's happening. Researchers use computer models to predict how much warming is expected. The models are complex and involve absorption about climate and human activities. For these reasons, predictions are open to debate. The IPCC reports the results of 6 different models which predict that average global temperatures will rise by the end of the 21st century from just under 2 degrees Celsius to as much as 6.4 degrees Celsius higher than they were in the year 2000. You convert that into Fahrenheit, you would understand that that's very significant. And you can see what kind of change is this graph is this called? All right. Some climate changes are likely to threaten ecosystems ranging from tundra and northern forests to coral reefs in the Amazon rainforest. Okay, that's a bit dramatic, but maybe that's not so much. Sea levels may rise enough to flood some coastal ecosystems and human communities. Some models suggest that parts of North America may experience more droughts during the summer growing seasons, and scientists have been saying for more than 2 decades that the world needs to recognize the importance of climate change and take steps to minimize further warming. The changes in behavior needed to cut back on greenhouse gas emissions will be major and will require input from economics and many other fields beyond biology. Some changes will rely on new technology for renewable energy and more efficient energy use, and we have begun to see the emergence of electric cars, recycled products, and green buildings like ours. our high school building's a green building. Nations of the world have begun holding international climate summits at which they attempt to work out agreements to protect the atmosphere and climate. Something we all need to strive for. So objective 2 is identify the role of ecology in a sustainable future. 1, by recognizing a problem environment. 2, researching that problem to determine its cause. And then 3, using scientific understanding to change our behavior, we can have a positive impact on the global environment. So finally, can you explain the concept of ecological footprint and also identify the role of ecology in a sustainable future? And there's your cute picture.